You're standing at the grocery store checkout. The cashier reads out your total, $318. You look down at the cart, same chicken, same bread, same stuff you've bought every week for 3 years. You stand there for a second doing the math in your head. It used to be $210. You didn't add anything. Nothing in your life got more expensive on purpose, but somehow that number keeps going up every single month, and your paycheck, which you did get a raise on, technically somehow covers less. Here's the part that should actually alarm you. The official story says the economy is doing fine. Unemployment is low, wages went up, GDP is growing. And you're standing at a grocery store checkout, feeling like someone quietly moved the floor 3 inches to the left and nobody told you. You're not imagining it. You're not bad with money. The math actually changed, and over the next 50 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how, and more importantly, what to do before the next set of changes arrives, because they're already on the way. My name is Nick. I spend an uncomfortable amount of time studying why the financial rules most people grew up with no longer apply. If that sounds relevant to your life right now, stick around, because this is the video I wish someone had made for me 5 years ago. Let me give you a number. Median household income in America in 2019, $83,260. Median household income in 2024, $83,730. Both adjusted for inflation. 5 years, 1 full economic cycle, a pandemic, historic inflation surge, and a labor market that got called the strongest in a generation. And the typical American household, in real purchasing power, moved forward by $470. That's $94 a year. It's rounding error. It's 1 tank of gas. Now here's what happened to everything else during those same 5 years. Grocery prices are up over 25% cumulatively since 2020. Car insurance, and this is the one nobody talks about, is up roughly 50% from where it was just 4 years ago. Hospital services rose 6.7% last year alone, the largest increase since 2010. The average family of 4 now spends between $1,300 and $1,430 a month just on food. That same family was spending around $800 in 2020 for the exact same cart. So wages went up slightly, and everything you spend money on went up significantly. That gap, that quiet, persistent gap between what comes in and what goes out, is the story underneath every story I'm going to tell you today. But before we go further, I want to introduce you to someone. Now let's call him Elijah. Elijah is 34. He works in marketing for a mid-sized company in Columbus, Ohio. He makes $71,000 a year, which is actually above the median. He got a 4% raise last year, which felt good. He drives a used Honda. He doesn't have crazy expenses. He's not buying designer clothes or going on European vacations. He does the right things, mostly. And yet, every month, Elijah opens his banking app and stares at a number that never seems to grow. He's not in crisis, he's just stuck. Every raise gets absorbed by something before he can feel it. Every time he thinks he's getting ahead, the ground shifts slightly underneath him. Elijah isn't a cautionary tale, he's the median. And what's happening to him isn't bad luck, it's math. Here's the math. According to the Indeed hiring lab, only 57% of workers saw their paychecks actually outpace inflation last year. The other 43%, nearly half the workforce, lost purchasing power even while receiving raises. A 4% raise when inflation runs 5% is a pay cut with extra steps. You can feel good about the number on the letter and still fall behind in your actual life. That's not a paradox, that's arithmetic. And then there's the thing happening at the grocery store that doesn't show up in the official inflation numbers at all. Shrinkflation. Simply, orange juice shrank from 52 ounces to 46 ounces. Gatorade dropped from 32 ounces to 28. Cliff Bars went from 12 packs to 10 packs. A major ice cream brand reduced their milk fat below the federal threshold, meaning the law no longer allows them to call it ice cream. It's now legally frozen dairy dessert, and the price went up. I want you to think about the boardroom meeting where someone decided, rather than admit we reduce quality, let's just change the legal classification of the product. That happened. That was a real decision made by real people, and they charged you more for it. 75% of Americans have noticed shrinkflation, and 48% have walked away from a brand because of it. And it drove somewhere between 3% and 10% of all grocery price inflation from 2019 to 2023, on top of the CPI increases already being tracked. It's a hidden tax on your weekly shop that doesn't show up in the headline number. This is what the floor moving actually looks like. Not a dramatic crash, not a moment you can point to. Just a slow, persistent drift where the same effort produces slightly less every year. And by the time you notice how far you've moved, you're genuinely not sure how it happened, the system around Elijah changed, you probably feel it too, and the official numbers are specifically designed to make that movement look smaller than it is. I want to tell you about a specific pair of shoes. Let's say they're made in Vietnam. Most shoes are. About 30% of all footwear sold in America comes from there. They're manufactured, packed into a shipping container, sent across the Pacific, unloaded at the port of Los Angeles, trucked to a distribution center in the Midwest, and eventually placed on a shelf at a store near you. The whole journey takes about 6 weeks. On April 2nd, 2025, that journey got more expensive, significantly more expensive. And that was the day the administration signed what they called Liberation Day tariffs. A baseline 10% tariff on goods from nearly every country on Earth, with much higher rates on specific trading partners. Vietnam got hit with a 46% reciprocal tariff at peak. That pair of shoes, the same shoes, made the same way by the same hands, suddenly had a 46% levy attached to it before it even reached American soil. Footwear prices jumped roughly 40% in the short run. Clothing, 33 to 37%. New cars saw an estimated $7,600 added to the average sticker price from tariffs alone. Food prices, from tariffs specifically before any other factor, rose 4.5%. That's 3 times a normal year's worth of grocery inflation, dropped on top of everything that was already happening. Yale's budget lab estimated the peak cost to the average American household at $3,800 a year. After trade negotiations, pauses, and partial rollbacks, that settled to somewhere between $1,700 and $2,400 annually. The Tax Foundation called the peak tariff rate 22.5%. The highest average U.S. tariff since 1909. That's not a typo, 1909. Here's the thing that most of the coverage missed, and I had to go back and check this twice because it seemed too clean to be true. A New York Fed analysis found that Americans bore 94% of the cost of these tariffs. Not the foreign companies exporting to us, not the trading partners, us. 94 cents of every dollar of tariff cost was paid by American consumers and businesses. And prices don't come back down just because legal authority changes or court issues a ruling. Ask any economist. Prices are sticky on the way up and slow as molasses on the way down. The pair of shoes that went up 40% isn't going back to its original price because a judge issued an opinion. The retailer repriced it, restickered it, updated their margins, and moved on. Elijah, by the way, bought new running shoes in June 2025. He noticed the price was higher than he expected. He stood in the store for a moment, did a quick mental calculation, bought them anyway because he needed them, and moved on. He had no idea that his shoes came with a 40% embedded tariff story attached to them. Most people didn't. That's exactly how a policy functions as a hidden tax. It lands before most people know to look for it. Alright, I want to pause here and tell you something that I genuinely find difficult to explain out loud, without it sounding made up. American credit card debt just hit $1.277 trillion, the highest figure since records started in 1999, up 66% from the pandemic low in 4 years. But the number I actually want you to focus on is this. Americans paid $160 billion in credit card interest in 2024 alone, not principal. Just the fee for being in debt. That's roughly $480 for every man, woman, and child in the country, paid not to buy anything, not to invest in anything, just for the privilege of not being able to pay off last month's balance. The average person carrying a credit card balance owes $6,618. At the current average APR of 22.3%, if you make minimum payments on that balance, which the card companies carefully calculate to be just large enough to feel manageable and just small enough to keep you paying forever, that $6,618 takes over 18 years to eliminate and costs $9,259 in interest, more than the original debt, by a lot. Now meet Isabella. Isabella is 41, she's a nurse in Phoenix, Arizona. She makes $78,000 a year, like solid income by any measure. She's not reckless, she has 2 kids, she manages the household budget carefully, or she tries to, but over the last 2 years, something shifted. A car repair here, a medical copay there, a month where groceries ran $200 over budget, and she put the difference on the card, meaning to pay it back. She never quite did. Her balance grew from $800 to $2,400 to $4,100 to where it is now. $6,200 on one card, $1,800 on another. She makes minimum payments. She tells herself she'll tackle it properly when things settle down. Things haven't settled down. At 22% interest, Isabella's $8,000 in credit card debt is costing her roughly $147 a month, just in interest charges, money that buys her exactly nothing. It doesn't reduce the balance, it doesn't improve her situation. It just keeps the meter running. Over a year, that's $1,764 paid to the card companies for the privilege of still owing them $8,000. Isabella isn't an outlier. According to Federal Reserve data, 73% of credit card balances aren't from vacations or luxury purchases. They come from essential expenses, car repairs, medical bills, home maintenance, groceries. 55% of people carrying balances say they're doing it specifically to cover necessities. This is survival debt. It's the debt of a budget that no longer clears, and it's getting harder to escape. 12.7% of all credit card balances, more than $1 and $8, are now 90 or more days delinquent. Fed Chair Jerome Powell acknowledged what he called a bifurcated economy, where lower-income consumers are, in his words, struggling and buying less. You don't need a PhD in economics to translate that. Half the country is financially fine. The other half is Isabella. Auto loans tell the same story with bigger numbers. The average new car payment hit $767 per month in late 2025. Record high. Nearly 1 in 5 new car loans now exceeds $1,000 per month, and to keep those monthly numbers feeling manageable, lenders stretch the terms. 84-month car loans, that's 7 years, hit an all-time high of 21.5% of all new car financing, nearly triple what they represented in 2015. 7 years. Think about what you were doing 7 years ago. Now imagine still making payments on whatever car you bought that year today. That's the contract millions of Americans signed, often without really processing what 7 years of payments actually means in the context of their financial life. By the time you make your last payment on a 7-year loan, the car is typically worth a fraction of what you paid. 29.4% of new car buyers are rolling negative equity into their next purchase, meaning they finished a loan underwater and immediately started the next $17,064 in the hole on average. They imported the debt from the last deal into this one. The negative equity cycle is essentially a financial treadmill that moves backward. Then there are student loans, $1.696 trillion total, 43 million borrowers, average debt of $39,633 per person. When payments fully resumed and the grace period ended in late 2024, the transition rate into serious delinquency hit 14.3%, the fastest acceleration ever recorded going back to the year 2000. 7 million borrowers are in outright default right now, and 7.5 million who had organized their entire financial lives around an income-based repayment plan called SAVE just had it declared unlawful and are being transitioned out of it by July 2026. They built a budget around a specific monthly number. That number changed. They're figuring out the rest in real time. Here's what ties all of this together into one picture. During the pandemic, American households accumulated $2.1 trillion in excess savings by August 2021. That buffer is entirely gone. The San Francisco Fed confirmed it was fully depleted by March 2024. The personal savings rate is sitting at 4%, nearly half the historical average of 8.4%. 37% of Americans cannot cover a $400 emergency with cash. 59% can't handle a $1,000 unexpected expense. What do people do when the unexpected expense arrives and the savings aren't there? They reach for the credit card or the buy now, pay later app. 25% of BNPL users are now financing groceries, not vacations. Groceries, 41% paid late in 2025. Most of that debt is invisible to credit bureaus, accumulating silently underneath the headline numbers. People are using interest-bearing microloans to buy milk and chicken. That's where we are. The credit card balance is the visible part of the iceberg. The BNPL debt, the rolled over auto equity, the student loan limbo, the depleted savings buffer, that's what's underneath. And icebergs do the damage you can't see coming. I want you to meet Luna. Luna is 27. She graduated with a computer science degree in 2020, right as remote work normalized and tech hiring went vertical. She landed a role at a mid-sized software company doing data analysis and workflow automation. By 2023, she was making $89,000. She was exactly who the economy said it wanted: digital, skilled, mobile, tech fluent. In March 2025, her team of 6 was reduced to 2. The official reason in the company email was AI-assisted process optimization, which is a very clean way of saying the work you were hired to do, a tool now does faster and for less money. Luna spent 4 months applying for roles in her field before landing something at $71,000, $18,000 less than she was making, with a longer commute and fewer benefits. She considers herself one of the lucky ones because she knows 2 people from her graduating class who still haven't found anything comparable. Luna is not a cautionary tale about making bad career choices. She made the choices everyone told her were correct. She's a preview. Now let me show you the numbers behind her story. The official unemployment rate is 4.3%. That sounds fine. That's supposed to sound fine. Here's the problem with 4.3%. It doesn't count the 6 million people who aren't in the labor force but say they currently want a job. It doesn't count the 1.8 million people who've been unemployed for more than 27 weeks, a figure that jumped by 322,000 in a single year. It doesn't count people working part-time because they can't find full-time work. Once you fold all of those groups in, what the BLS calls the U6 rate, unemployment sits at 7.9%. Nearly double the headline number. And then in September 2025, the Bureau of Labor Statistics released a benchmark revision. Their conclusion: the US had 911,000 fewer jobs than previously reported as of March 2025. 911,000 phantom jobs. The strongest labor market in a generation was, in a statistically meaningful sense, about 10% smaller than the monthly reports had suggested. The jobs weren't there. The number was. Here's the one that should make you put the phone down for a second. In 2025, total announced layoffs hit 1,206,374, up 58% from 2024, the highest since COVID. The hiring side of that equation, planned hires in 2025 fell to 507,647, the lowest since 2010, down 34% from the year before. Companies were cutting at near COVID levels while hiring at the worst pace in 15 years. The unemployment rate looks manageable only because people who stop looking for work stop getting counted. The actual picture is a labor market shedding jobs faster than it's adding them and getting statistical cover from the way the measurement works. And driving more of those cuts than anything else, AI. In 2025, 54,836 job cuts explicitly cited AI as the cause. By March 2026, AI had become the single leading stated reason for layoffs. 15,341 in 1 month alone, 25% of all cuts. Goldman Sachs estimates 6 to 7% of the entire US workforce, roughly 11 million workers, faces displacement over the next decade. McKinsey found that 57% of US work hours could theoretically be automated using technology that exists today. Not future technology, Current. And here's the cruel irony I genuinely find hard to sit with. The people getting hit first aren't the ones who ignored technology. They're the ones who specifically trained for it. Goldman's senior economist found that unemployment among workers aged 20 to 30 in tech-exposed occupations rose by roughly 3 percentage points since early 2025. An entire generation was told, learn to code, get comfortable with data, become a digital native, and now, the thing they specialized in is the thing that's replacing them. That's a brutal way for an economic bet to pay off. Luna would agree, the Klarna story is almost too on the nose. Klarna replaced 700 customer service workers with AI. They didn't do it quietly, they announced it publicly with a certain amount of pride. Customer satisfaction tanked. Service quality degraded in ways that showed up in the business metrics. They quietly went back to hiring humans, their CAO said, and I'm paraphrasing, it turns out people want to talk to people. Over half of UK business leaders who rushed to replace staff with AI now say they regret it. The technology worked in a narrow, context-specific way, but the 700 workers who were replaced during the experiment didn't get their jobs back when the experiment failed. And that's the pattern playing out across industries. Companies try it, some of it works, some of it doesn't, and the workers caught in the middle absorb the cost of the trial either way. Nobody sends a refund check for the months of lost income while the boardroom figures out it went too far. So what does this mean if you're working right now? The workers earning a 56% wage premium are those combining existing expertise with genuine AI fluency, not replacing their work with AI, but augmenting it, using it as a tool that makes them faster and harder to replace. A nurse who can work alongside AI diagnostic tools is worth more than one who can't. A marketer who uses AI-assisted research produces more with less time. A financial analyst who uses AI for data synthesis covers in hours what used to take days. Luna, for what it's worth, spent 3 months after her layoff learning how to build automated data pipelines using AI tools. Her new role pays $71,000, but she's already getting recruiter messages at $95,000 for roles that didn't exist 2 years ago. The floor moved, she's figuring out how to move with it. The World Economic Forum estimates 39% of current skill sets will be outdated between 2025 and 2030, 4 in 10 workers facing skills that are actively losing market value. The question isn't whether to engage with this, it's how fast. I want you to meet Calix. Calix is 58. He's worked in operations management for 30 years. He's made good money, never lavish but consistently solid, somewhere between $65,000 and $85,000 most of his career. He has a 401k. He's been contributing to it for years, not maximally, but regularly. He considers himself on track. Last spring, for the first time in his life, Calix actually sat down and ran the retirement math. Not the vague version he held in his head, the real version. He looked at his balance, $194,000. He looked up how much he'd need to maintain something close to his current lifestyle in retirement. He found the number $1.26 million, the median estimate from a Northwestern Mutual survey of what Americans believe they need. He sat with those two numbers for a long time. $194,000, $1,260,000. Then he looked up Social Security. He'd get about $2,100 a month if he waited until 67. He looked up how much healthcare costs in retirement. Fidelity estimates a 65-year-old couple needs $345,000 just to cover lifetime medical expenses. Calix is not exceptional. He's the median. The median 55 to 64-year-old in America has $185,000 saved. 14.7% of what they'll likely need, an 85% gap with less than a decade to close it. 1 in 3 American adults has zero retirement savings, not low, not behind, zero. Here's the math that almost no financial content will run because it's too uncomfortable to be popular. Start saving at 35, contribute 10% of the median household income, about $63,000. So roughly $6,300 per year, get a 3% employer match. earn 7% annual returns for 30 years. You'd accumulate around $830,000 in nominal dollars. That sounds encouraging until you adjust for 30 years of inflation at 3%, which reduces the real purchasing power of that $830,000 to about $342,000 in today's dollars. At Morningstar's updated safe withdrawal rate of 3.7%, your nest egg generates $12,654 per year. Add average Social Security of $23,700. Total retirement income, $36,354 a year. Before healthcare, $36,354 per year. In a country where the average one-bedroom apartment in most mid-sized cities costs over $1,400 a month, that math requires no further commentary. The 401k has a problem that rarely gets mentioned in polite financial company: the fees. The Department of Labor calculated that on $25,000 invested at 7% over 35 years, the difference between a 0.5% annual fee and a 1.5% annual fee is $64,000 in final wealth. $64,000 gone, not to taxes, not to a market crash, but to fund expenses disclosed somewhere in your plan documents in a font specifically chosen to discourage reading. The plan administrator earns those fees. The employer chose the plan. Your HR department isn't a financial advisor. The fee quietly runs year after year, and you don't notice until you run the math that nobody told you to run. Demos calculated that over a full career, for 401k fees consume nearly 1/3 of investment returns for a median income household. 1/3, silently compounding against you. Then there's Social Security. The 2025 Trustees Report projects the trust fund depletes in 2033, at which point, absent congressional action, benefits face an automatic 23 to 24% across-the-board cut, worth $18,100 less per year for a typical dual-earning couple. The legislation passed in summer 2025, marketed partly as strengthening senior security, actually moved that date to 2032, according to the SSA's own chief actuary. The bill that was supposed to help moved the problem closer. Build whatever retirement plan you like, but build it assuming this number is not fixed. Here's the counterintuitive part. The 401k was never designed to be America's primary retirement vehicle. It started as a tax loophole in the Revenue Act of 1978, a way for highly compensated executives to defer income. Companies discovered it was cheaper than running pension plans, they switched, and when they did, the average employer contribution per employee was cut nearly in half. The entire burden of retirement funding, the investment decisions, the market risk, the longevity risk, the fee navigation, shifted from employers who had actuarial teams and professional fund managers to individual employees who got a pamphlet. That was the deal. Most people didn't know they'd agreed to it. Calix is still sitting with his spreadsheet. He's not panicking, he's making adjustments, maxing his contributions, looking at whether a part-time consulting situation makes sense post-retirement, running different scenarios. He's in a better position than most 58-year-olds because he looked. The ones who don't look are the ones who arrive at 65 and face the numbers for the first time with no runway to change them. Let me tell you about a couple in Austin, Texas. We'll call them Jordan and Alex. Combined income of $148,000 a year, which in most of America qualifies as upper middle class and comfortably above average. They've been renting a 2-bedroom apartment for $1,900 a month. They've been saving for a down payment for 4 years. In late 2024, they started seriously looking at houses. The median home price in the Austin area was hovering around $450,000. In Austin is not a mansion. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in a suburb with decent schools and a commute. With 10% down, the $45,000 they'd saved, their mortgage payment at 7% interest would be roughly $2,990 per month. Add property taxes, $520. Homeowner's insurance, $280. Maintenance budget at 1% annually, $375. They're at $4,165 per month. That's $2,265 more per month than their rent. On their combined take-home after taxes of about $8,900, housing would consume 47% of their income. Not the 28% that financial guidelines suggest, not even the 35% that some advisors allow in expensive markets, 47%. They didn't buy the house, they're still renting, and they feel like they failed at something, even though what actually happened is that they ran the math correctly. The National Association of Home Builders released a study in March 2025. 74.9% of U.S. households, 100.6 million families, cannot afford a median price new home. 3 in 4, not because they're irresponsible, because the income required to follow the standard 28% guideline now sits between $112,000 and $141,000 depending on your market, and median household income is $83,730. That gap isn't a rounding error, it's $30,000 to $57,000 per year of income that doesn't exist for most families. And here's the part that makes this a genuine trap rather than just an affordability problem. The people who bought when it was affordable are staying put. 50.6% of all outstanding mortgages in America carry interest rates below 4%. The average rate on existing mortgages is 4.4%. If those homeowners sell and buy something equivalent at today's 7% rates, their monthly payment roughly doubles, so they don't sell. 54% of homeowners say no mortgage rate would make them comfortable selling their home. 41% of those with rates below 3% say they'd essentially never buy again at any rate. Philadelphia Fed researchers found that every 1 percentage point of this lock-in effect reduces the probability of selling by 18%. The result, existing home sales have tracked around 4 million units per year, 25% below 2019 levels for the third year running. We're at sales volumes last seen during the 2009 housing crash, not because nobody wants to buy, because the people who own can't afford to move, so the inventory never materializes, so prices stay elevated, so the people trying to enter can't get in. It's a closed loop, and Jordan and Alex are on the outside of it. Bankrate ran the rent versus buy analysis across the 50 largest US metros. They're finding renting is financially better than buying in all 50. In San Jose, renters save $4,783 per month compared to equivalent homeowners. In 2015, just 11 years ago, the national monthly cost difference between owning and renting was 84 cents. Today, it's hundreds to thousands of dollars depending on your market. I want to name the emotional weight of this because I think it gets glossed over in the data. Homeownership in America was sold as the central adult milestone, the measure of having made it, the thing your parents did and their parents did, and you were supposed to do by some reasonable age. The median first-time homebuyer age just hit 40. The first-time buyer share of the market dropped to 21%, the lowest since 1981. And every month that Jordan and Alex stay in their rental, they absorb a low-grade cultural message that they're behind, that they haven't made it, that something is wrong with them. Nothing is wrong with them, the math is wrong, and there's a meaningful difference between those two things. Is a recession coming? Probably the most common question in financial media right now, and the honest answer from somebody who isn't trying to get clicks from alarm, nobody knows with confidence. What we do know is that major institutions spent most of 2025 raising their probability estimates significantly. Goldman Sachs went from 15% recession probability in January 2025 to 65% by April, then pulled it back to 30% after trade negotiations showed progress. JP Morgan peaked at 65%. Some independent economists went to 85 and 90%. And yet, the economy didn't officially enter recession in 2025. GDP grew around 2%. Manufacturing showed signs of rebounding in early 2026. The labor market, even with its problems, didn't collapse. And the US economy has a remarkable capacity to absorb punishment and keep moving. But here's the nuance that matters most for your personal financial decisions. A recession doesn't have to be officially declared for your household to feel one. If your costs rise faster than your income, that's a personal recession. If you lose your job during a period the economists are calling moderate growth, that's a family recession. If your debt compresses your choices until you're making decisions out of desperation rather than judgment, that's a recession of options. The NBER's timeline and your bank account's reality are two different calendars. If a broader downturn arrives, it faces a very different policy toolkit than 2008 or 2020 when Lehman collapsed in 2008. Federal debt sat at 64% of GDP, and the Fed had 525 basis points of room to cut rates. In 2020, Congress deployed over $5 trillion in fiscal stimulus. Today, the national debt is near 100% of GDP. Interest payments exceed $1 trillion per year. The annual deficit runs $1.7 trillion. The Fed has far less room to maneuver. Ray Dalio put it plainly, he's worried about something worse than a recession, comparing the structural moment to the 1930s, not in terms of severity, but in terms of the tools that worked before no longer applying. Larry Summers called recent economic policy a self-inflicted wound and warned of job losses in the millions. None of that means panic. Economies cycle. They always have. The stock market has returned positive over every 20-year period in its history. The right move has never been to exit. But it does mean the next 12 to 24 months deserve more intentionality than it'll probably work out. Because the gap between people who prepared modestly and people who didn't tends to become visible exactly when conditions get worse. Before we get to what you should actually do, I need to spend a few minutes on something that matters more than any specific financial tactic, your psychology. Because economic stress doesn't just drain your wallet, it actively degrades your decision-making in ways that compound the financial damage. And understanding this might be the most practically useful thing in this entire video. Behavioral economists have documented something called normalcy bias. It's the tendency of the brain to assume the future will resemble the present, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. On 70% of people displayed delayed threat recognition during disasters. Federal Reserve officials themselves failed to officially recognize the 2008 recession until it had been underway for 6 months. The same cognitive instinct that makes daily life manageable becomes a liability when conditions change faster than the mind updates. Right now, normalcy bias is whispering to a lot of American households, it's uncomfortable, but it'll adjust. It always does. And maybe it will. But there's a real difference between it'll probably be fine as a considered conclusion and it'll probably be fine as a way of not having to do the uncomfortable math. One is optimism, the other is expensive. Then there's anchoring. If you refinance at 2.8% in 2021, your brain has anchored to that as the normal mortgage rate and is treating 6.5% as a temporary aberration to wait out. But rates in the 6 to 8% range were the norm through most of the 1990s. The 3% window was the anomaly, a one-time side effect of the most aggressive Fed intervention in history. Waiting for it to return before making any housing decision is not a strategy. It's anchoring to a historical exception, as if it were a natural law. The same brain that's holding out for a 3% mortgage is also the one that panic sold investments in 2020 and missed the recovery. It's working against you in both directions. Speaking of which, 1 in 5 Americans reports doom spending, making impulsive purchases as a coping mechanism for economic anxiety. Among people under 35, it's closer to 37%. The cycle: doom scroll the financial news, feel a spike of anxiety, buy something to briefly relieve it, wake up with the same anxiety plus new debt, repeat. The financial media ecosystem profits from your anxiety regardless of whether it produces useful action. It is not designed to help you make better decisions. It is designed to keep you watching. And the hardest one, loss aversion. Kahneman and Tversky proved that losses feel roughly twice as painful as equivalent gains feel pleasurable. This is why people stay in bad investments waiting to get back to even. It's why 30.9% of investors who panic sold during downturns never return to the market. They miss the entire recovery because the pain of re-entering felt too close to risking another loss. None of this makes you irrational. It makes you human. The question is whether you're aware of it when the decision moment arrives. Here's what the research on past downturns keeps confirming, and that most financial content refuses to say out loud because it isn't exciting enough to go viral. The people who came out of 2008 and 2020 financially stronger weren't smarter or luckier. They made small, boring adjustments before the pressure arrived, and because they acted early, they acted from stability rather than desperation. Decisions made from desperation are reliably worse. You sell at the bottom, you take the first job offer because you have no runway to wait. You put the car repair on a 22% card because there's nowhere else for it to go. The goal of what follows is to get you to a position where that doesn't happen to you. Start with the emergency fund, and I know that sounds like the most boring possible way to open a financial action plan, but stay with me. Think about what it actually feels like to not have one. You're living on a budget that works mostly until something breaks. The car, the tooth, the water heater that picks a Sunday night in January to give up. And suddenly you're staring at a $1,200 bill with $340 in your checking account. You put it on the card. The card charges 22%. Now you're paying interest on a car repair for the next 18 months. That is the specific sequence of events that builds most people's credit card debt. Not recklessness, just the compounding cost of having no buffer. The target is 3 to 6 months of actual living expenses. What your bank statements show when you add everything up, not what you think you spend. Are you single income, volatile industry, or self-employed? Push that to 9 months. Keep it in a high-yield savings account. Top rates right now run 4.0 to 5.0% APY fully FDIC insured versus the national average of 0.6%. On $15,000, that difference is $660 a year just for choosing the right account. Keep it at a separate institution from your checking. The 1 to 2 day transfer friction is a feature, not a bug. It makes it psychologically harder to raid for things that aren't emergencies. Now, the debt, I want to be direct because I think people get talked into managing their debt when what they actually need to do is eliminate it. Think about Isabella from the debt section, $8,000 in credit card balances at 22% interest, paying $147 a month in interest charges that buy her nothing. Every financial pundit will tell you to diversify your investments, build a portfolio, think long term, and they're right. But if Isabella puts $500 a month into an index fund while carrying $8,000 at 22%, she needs her investments to return 22% just to break even on the debt cost. The S&P 500 averages around 10% annually over the long run. She's not breaking even, she's going backward while feeling productive. Paying off a 22% credit card is a guaranteed 22% return on every dollar applied to it. Nothing in personal finance matches that. The debt avalanche, minimum payments on everything, then every extra dollar to the highest interest rate saves the most money mathematically. The debt snowball, like smallest balance first, provides psychological wins that keep people going. Research from James Madison University found the actual dollar difference between both approaches in realistic scenarios can be less than $30. The best method is whichever one you'll actually finish. If you have solid credit, a balance transfer card with 0% intro APR for 15 to 21 months can buy you a runway. Typically a 3 to 5% transfer fee, but at 22% ongoing interest, the math almost always favors it. Do not stop investing. I want to say this clearly because every instinct during economic uncertainty pushes the other way. JP Morgan tracked what happens when investors miss the market's best days. $10,000 fully invested in the S&P 500 over 20 years grows to roughly $70,000. Miss the 10 best days, $35,000. Miss 20 best days, $20,000. And here's the part that should permanently change how you think about this. 7 of the 10 best days occurred within 15 calendar days of the 10 worst days. If you sell during the crash, you almost mathematically guarantee missing the recovery every time. Someone who bought the S&P 500 at the absolute peak in October 2007, the single worst possible moment right before the worst financial crisis in 80 years, and just earned a 410% total return through the start of 2026. That's not a typo, 410%. The only move that doesn't eventually work is getting out and staying out. Keep your automatic contributions running. The 2026 401k limit is $24,000 to $31,500 if you're 50 or older. Always capture the full employer match first. It's a 100% guaranteed same-day return on those dollars. No investment on earth offers that. Now here's the one that I genuinely don't understand why more people don't use, the HSA. If you have access to a health savings account through a high deductible plan, it's the single most tax-advantaged account in the entire US tax code. Contributions are tax deductible. Growth is tax-free. Withdrawals for medical expenses are tax-free. That's 3 tax benefits in one account. No other vehicle does all 3. The 2026 limits are $4,450 individual and $8,950 family. The advanced move: pay medical expenses out of pocket, save every receipt in a folder somewhere, let the HSA compound for years, then reimburse yourself later. The money grows tax-free the entire time. It's one of the most quietly powerful wealth-building tools available to working Americans. And it sits mostly unused because the name has the word health in it, and people assume it's just for co-pays. On housing, I'm not going to tell you to buy or rent. I'm going to tell you to run your actual math for your specific market, rather than making the decision based on what culture tells you adulthood looks like. If home prices in your area exceed 20 times the annual rent for equivalent housing, renting is mathematically advantageous right now, and that threshold currently includes most major US metros. There is no prize for being house poor. There is no trophy for a mortgage that keeps you up at night. If you already own at a rate below 4%, that mortgage is a financial asset. Treat it like one and don't trade it away without running the full cost of doing so. And last, if you're in a year where your income is temporarily lower than usual, career gap, transition, reduced hours, look at Roth conversions. Converting traditional IRA money to Roth while your tax bracket is lower means paying at today's rate so everything grows tax-free forever after. Given that the federal government is running $1.7 trillion annual deficits and the debt is near 100% of GDP, the argument that tax rates will be higher in 20 years than they are today is not a fringe view. It's basic arithmetic about where the revenue eventually has to come from. I want to leave you with 2 versions of the same person, 5 years from now. The first one is 39. She watched a video like this one, nodded at the data, felt genuinely alarmed for about 20 minutes, and then life happened. Didn't set up the high yield account. Told herself she'd tackle the credit card balance when things settled down. Things didn't settle down. Kept meaning to look at what fees her 401k was charging. Never quite got to it. The investments stayed roughly the same. The debt stayed roughly the same. The savings rate stayed roughly the same. In 2031, she's managing, but the margin in her financial life is thin. Every unexpected expense is a problem. Every economic shift is a threat. She's not in crisis. She's just not free. The second one is also 39. Same job, same income, same starting point in early 2026. She moved $12,000 from a regular savings account to a high-yield account. One afternoon, one task. She set up an extra $200 per month toward the credit card balance. She increased her 401k contribution by 2%. She spent 1 hour looking at her plan's fee structure and moved to lower cost funds inside the same plan. None of those moves were dramatic. None of them required sacrifice that changed her daily life. But compounded over 5 years, she now has $28,000 more in savings than version 1. She has $9,000 less in debt. Her retirement account has an estimated $31,000 more in it because of the fee switch alone. She has margin, options, and the ability to make decisions from stability rather than desperation. The gap between those two people isn't intelligence, it isn't income, It's whether they acted on what they already knew. You're watching this video, you paid attention to this for 50 minutes, which means you already know more than most people. The only question now is what you do with it. If this changed something for you, drop a comment and tell me what the first move is. Subscribe if you want to keep thinking about this stuff. There's more coming, and you'll want to be here for it.